What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you. We're also still coronavirus free. Yay.
Yay.
Positive silver linings there. So today we are reviewing the newest album from Afterbirth, Four Dimensional Flesh. This came out on the 13th of March on Unique Leader Records. And this is a band, honestly, I really wasn't familiar with at all. They're from Long Island, New York. They formed in 1993, but broke up in 95, then reformed in 2013. And this is only their second full length. They have a couple of demos, I think an EP and a compilation other than these two full lengths. The bassist of this band is also the bassist for Helmet, which is a stark contrast from this band for sure. And their current frontman, Will Smith, is the frontman for Artificial Brain, and that's not the Will Smith that anyone's really thinking of here. I'm pretty sure of it.
It's a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
And then death metal. Now, this is a bit of an homage to their former singer who unfortunately committed suicide in 2016. He was their original singer when they formed, and I believe was part of the reformation in 2013, and unfortunately no longer with us. This actually contains some of his lyrics and vocal patterns that are actually used on the second track in here, which we'll get into. So this is, again, a band I had no idea about that has a lot of interesting history. And, well, this is a really wild listen.
Yes. I didn't know what we were getting into, but it definitely wasn't what I thought we were getting into. It starts off with the track Beheading the Buddha. But, by the way, the song titles on this album are really entertaining. Definitely raw sounding and muddy, as is the fact that this album was recorded with no triggers and no clicks and was just a live studio jam. So
impressed.
Yeah, I really am.
The level of technical prowess on this.
Right, to do without
skill.
Click tracks too in the studio, like, good fucking job, you guys. The bass is higher in the mix, and at first it was kind of like an issue, and then the bass got
work
really good for being from Helmet.
Yeah, I mean, you expect Helmet to be more, kind of, just kind of, root lines, just kind of making the song fill out. This guy is actually taking lead parts on here.
Yeah, dude, it was really well done.
Very jazzy, very fluid.
Mm-hmm.
But this song is still very, very brutal, very technical. It reminded me of a less groovy Deeds of Flesh, which we're jamming right now. And it's just a real interesting mix here. And it becomes very much brutal death, especially when you hear the vocals, which the vocals come in with the lowest gurgle possible. It sounds like a drain clearing. It's just super gurgly.
Like Dr. Claw drowning.
Yeah, in pudding. It's super thick. It's very much like a band like Wormed, or, take any slam band like Devourment.
Yeah.
Or, the John Gallagher vocals from Dying Fetus. Very much like that. And this carries on to the second track, Spiritually Transmitted Disease, which is another fun title. This is the one that the original singer actually had the vocal patterns written for and some of the lyrics. And this one is a little bit different, but not too much. I think it's a little bit murkier in spots. It kind of reminded me of a band like Drawn and Quartered, where that's very brutal, but it also has that murky sound that's very similar to, like, Incantation.
Yep.
This is where the bass work really started standing out. There is almost kind of a bit where he takes, like, a lead while the guitarist is just playing sort of a breakdown part.
It's kind of like the guitars and the bass switch jobs, whereas the guitar has that just simple kind of droning feel, and the bass takes the lead work. It's really interesting. The snare drum's a little twangy on this, and again, I guess if you're working without triggers, it's just evident to me that he used an aluminum snare that was tuned too tight. That was my guess.
I mean, it does have the kind of brutal death snare sound, and it's kind of like mid-90s production for, like, brutal death metal, like Dying Fetus especially, like around, like, Grotesque Impalement or Killing on Adrenaline. It has that very raw sound.
Yeah.
And it's a little muddy. It might be deliberately muddy, too, because it kind of really kind of captures that sound. But, yeah, it definitely kind of hampers it in a bit. But I really wasn't taken out of it. And then we get to Girl in Landscape, which I don't know what that's about. It's an instrumental. But this changed pretty much the entire album for a while. This comes in with like dissonant melody and keys, and melody is kind of the key here. It's almost post-metal-ish.
I kind of got reminded of the first full-length release from Burnt by the Sun, the personal soundtrack to the Revolution. It just kind of had that overall vibe to it.
Yeah, I got reminded of stuff that isn't necessarily the most metal stuff, like Cave In, and not like their heavier stuff, but more of their sort of ambient art rock, where it's a lot of very dissonant strumming and lots of ambience and layering. Again, I went into this thinking this was going to be a sort of brutal death metal album or brutal tech death, and this kind of just jumped out as a bit of a change, and I thought it was going to be kind of an isolated thing. But the next track, Everything in Its Path, really continues the sound.
Yes.
And you get, again, these surprisingly melodic strumming sections instead of just brutal chugs.
I get reminded of Bloody Incantation again.
Yeah, it kind of has that weird, almost sci-fi-ish kind of feel to it. It's very interesting. Like, the dissonant stuff is an unexpected turn considering what I thought we were going into, and a lot of it reminded me of bands like Ulcerate. Ulcerate just thrives on dissonance.
Except for the end of the song. The end of the song was like a really melodic jam, really technical melodic jam. Reminded me of Beyond Creation.
Yeah, I was also surprised the vocals shifted around a little bit. Not super notably, but the register went up a little bit, became more of a clear growl, and the cadence was more sped up. It wasn't like the gurgle where it's really kind of hard to make out if there's multiple words being said there or it's just one long gurgle. This actually had distinct breaks in it, and it kind of really worked with the breakdown well. It really kind of just sank in a bit.
Another takeaway song for me wasn't so much the first one I'm going to mention, but the one that it leads into. The first song, Minimum Safe Distance, had kind of a really eerie opening between the drums and the guitars.
The big snare rolls.
Yeah, the big snare rolls
and the
with the really ambient, like, really out there guitar melody that's over like this snare drum roll thing.
Oddly enough, it felt kind of shoegazy.
Yeah, it was short.
Yeah.
Short AF. Now this record is short as fuck too, so... but then it led into the song Rooms of Nowhere that had kind of like a cynic-y opening to it.
Yes.
And then into like a Glass Casket feel.
Yeah, this one actually returned to the brutal death stuff a little bit. And this was one of the few tracks it really did, because honestly, there are maybe 4 tracks in there I would say are just pure brutal death. Mm-hmm. This was one of them, and it kind of brought in that early suffocation, like breakdowns. And it had that heavy ride hit, which sounds like a fucking fast-paced dinner bell.
Yeah.
And it also squeezed in some really, like, early tech death stuff, like the early tech death stuff for Gorguts. And this one was just kind of an interesting break from the more ambient stuff, but they would get back to that later.
I got reminded of Nile in this track, too. The Black Seeds of Vengeance.
The speed on the drums is insane. Swallowing Spiders has a Cryptopsy-like frantic pace to it, but it also kind of caps off towards the end with like a sludgy Morbid Angel-like breakdown too. And I really love the drum work on this one particularly. Like the fills were just spot on, very tight. Lots of almost kind of Pete Sandoval sort of blast beats where it's like, how is
I
that
thought about
human?
That too.
Now, it gets back to the more proggy ambient stuff with Dreaming Astral Body, which is another instrumental on here. And this one starts off with, like, you know, light guitars with some light percussion. The bass comes in, and it's very trancey, very dreamy, much like the title. Really reminded me of, like, Russian Circles.
Or the instrumental off of Between the Buried and Me is Alaska.
Yeah. I mean, it's proggy, but it's very ambient, kind of post-metal-y, and again, something I really wasn't expecting on this. But it was really done well, and I kind of wanted this little bit to keep going, but there was still some interesting stuff along the way here.
Yeah. Led into a song called Black Hole Kaleidoscope, which was pretty cool too. Reminded me of early Contortionists, like their very early career, like the first couple albums.
It has like that interesting dissonant breaks in there, but it's very chuggy again.
Yeah.
And this one, I thought
Yeah.
the guitars sounded a little bit different. They sounded a little bit chunkier. Like they were a little bit more forward in the mix. And
in parts, but then when it hit the jam section, it gets really ambient again.
there are some interesting spots on here where, despite it going like full bore blasts, some of the palm muted chugs, like how they're doing it, really reminded me a lot of Tool, like Adam Jones, like sort of palm muted chugs you'd hear in a song like Jammin. And I thought it was a really interesting little contrast there.
I mean, again, all the blasts in this album, for the most part, are solely drum related. The guitars, while they follow during technical moments, don't always keep pace with the drummer that never stops. Which is fine, actually. Again, it gave another dynamic to this record that I really wasn't counting on.
One of the issues I had with this album, though, is during these proggier sections, the vocals really didn't fit. Like during the Brutal Death part, sure, that gurgle and growl really fits. These proggier sections, it feels really out of place. And that was kind of an issue there. And especially when they're doing all sorts of really wild, creative stuff. Like, there is a breakdown towards the end of this song here that has almost a Primus-like bass line.
Yeah.
And the bass just comes right out, and it's very, almost kind of funky, almost just like that Les Claypool sort of style. And you still hear these growls over it, and it just doesn't fit. And, like, it doesn't fit in the more ambient spots, because the register really doesn't change a lot.
It'd be like if the vocalist from Tomb Mold was on a Cynic album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great at what he does.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit broader than Brutal Death. And I think maybe just some even different screams really would have worked a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it closes with the title track, which is more or less just sort of an outro track. And I wanted this track to continue because...
I did too, because the beginning was fucking sweet.
Awesome. It was one of the catchiest melodies in this entire album. And it got these really cool spacey keys in there too. And I like the fact that it ended with like kind of the big finish, like you'd see it in a live show.
The big rock star finish.
I mean, they recorded it live in the studio. Why not give it the big finish? I thought that was a really cool touch. But I really wanted this one to continue because I felt like it was really going to go somewhere.
Yeah, and it was only like a minute and a half long or something, which was a fucking bummer because this track had a lot of potential musically.
I really dug it.
Yep.
But overall, I thought this was a really interesting listen. It was surprising. And I like the fact that I got kind of some unexpected stuff in there that was really wild.
Yeah, because when you first mentioned this, you were like, well, it's a brutal slam band, and I was like, okay. Like, I know what that means, but this was not.
Yeah, no,
The classification on this album is
Brutal
shocking.
Death. Yeah, it says Brutal Death in Encyclopedia Metalum, and it's definitely more than that. So overall, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed this. Even the production, I thought, was a kind of a cool throwback to when I was really getting into more brutal death metal bands, like
Early Dying Fetus,
Deeds of Flesh, and all that fun shit. And I love the fact that there was some really imaginative songwriting in here, and they brought in elements from all over the metal spectrum, really.
Yeah.
But they still kept it very brutal, very tight, and the fact that this was jammed live in a studio with no clicks or triggers, dude, massive.
And you can definitely hear what it would sound like if it had those elements to it. I'd like to see him do it again. I'd like to see him remaster this album and actually beef it up a little bit, because there's a lot going on in here that I think gets drowned out. Which is why I'm going to give it 3.5 stars as well. I had a really fun listen. It wasn't straightforward brutal death like I thought it was going to be, and that's what I was prepped for. And the first couple songs alluded to such. But then when it hit the midpoint of the record, I was like, holy shit, there's a lot going on here. And really very talented musicians.
Yeah.
And again, props to the bass player of Helmet. I didn't see that coming out of that dude at all.
Yeah.
The songs were a little short, the production was a little meh, but again, they recorded it live. 3.5 stars. I had fun.
Yeah. So, if you like the review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we are still doing our giveaway for the Cryptopsy hoodie. Once we hit 1,000 subs, we're going to do a randomizer, and one of you lucky people are going to get a hoodie.
It's coronavirus free.
Yep, we just made sure. So once again, thank you guys for watching, and we will definitely be back with more reviews and a bunch of other cool killer content. Catch you guys later.